All right. So as somebody in industry, this is going to be a slightly different topic. I also work in an experience agency. So I've been involved in gamification for a number of years, looking at things coming from game design. I had some background in game design myself. My background's also in AI research. But what I've decided, where I've gone in the last few years has been looking at other areas which can inform us as we create engaging experiences in enterprise. So it isn't just adding badges and leaderboards, as we heard, isn't the best thing always, especially when you're creating healthcare applications for nurses, administrators. And what we've been trying to do at Synergy and through my research is there a framework which I can draw from some of this research, draw from some of the things coming out of neuroscience, this more conciliant science approach, and really try and look at what motivates people to do what they do. So this is just the start of a conversation. The reason I wanted to come here was obviously, get the conversation going from psychology to neuroscience to evolutionary psychology. But this is a framework which we've been using and finding a lot of success with, but it's just the start. So I think most of us are familiar from psychology, the old Skinner's rat, the light goes on, rat presses the lever, and gets a reward. How many people think the rat would have pressed the lever if he got a badge? This is kind of the first thing which behaviorism kind of has got out of fashion a little bit, but there's something really interesting around why badges are intrinsically motivating to us, as opposed to rats and where food is. But the other underlying premise is some new research coming out of neuroscience around the fact that what we thought for a long time, this idea of pleasure and rewards, was related to this concept of liking. And liking is actually one circuit in the brain. So liking is being separated out from this concept of wanting. Liking happens in one part of our brain, and it releases different neurochemicals, endorphins predominantly, which when you find something rewarding, it's not the food which is rewarding or the badge which is rewarding, it's the neurochemicals which get fired off in a particular part of your brain. And that's liking. But wanting is really interesting. And wanting got confused with and blended together with this idea of liking for a long time, because people kept on talking about dopamine. Dopamine, 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 the idea of dopamine being part of pleasure. What we're starting to realize is the dopamine in a particular part of the brain is actually to do with this concept of wanting. So if you break down the rat pressing the lever and you look at what's happening in the dopamine and endorphin circuits, the liking and the wanting circuit, the light and the lever are being paid attention to by dopamine, by the wanting circuit. The food obviously is paid attention to by the liking and that taking off. So Wolfram Schultz and his team out of Cambridge did a lot of research working with monkeys, and they actually tapped into the motivational circuit in the brain. So very different than the circuit which goes off for liking. They were specifically looking at the wanting and the dopamine firing. And what they did was a similar experiment to what behaviorism had been doing. A light goes off, 2 seconds later, sugar syrup is delivered. So what you see at the first line is you get a spike in dopamine when the sugar syrup is delivered. This is why I think for a long time we thought dopamine was to do with pleasure, because it happened at that same time. But what you see after multiple trials, green light, multiple trials, the dopamine starts firing at the green light, and nothing happens at actually when the sugar syrup is delivered. And that's confusing, right? What's going on there? They even did the experiment where they controlled it and said, all right, green light, no sugar syrup is delivered, and it's actually a drop in dopamine happens, so it's paying attention. It's called a learning mechanism. So this idea that the dopamine spiking at the first cue within a sequence is something which the wanting circuit is trying to anticipate what's happening in the future. I mean, as you can see from the bottom one where it's a blue light, where there's a 50-50 chance of getting sugar syrup or not. So this is really fascinating, especially coming from game design, because you see the dopamine spike at the blue light, and then this rise in dopamine as it anticipates, am I going to get it or not? I mean, so Amy's comment about gambling, that seems to be around gambling. Random rewards, as we call it, variable schedules, all of those things seem to be tapped into this wanting circuit. And so we've been trying to use that and try to understand if that can be used to understand how you create engagement or understand more about this wanting circuit. So Reed Montague gave a great analogy based upon this research, and he said, what is the motivational circuit doing? What is this dopamine spikes and drops? So the spike in dopamine is that really focused, engaged which you do when you're playing a game. Games are a perfect example of it. When you're playing a game and you're really focused trying to solve a puzzle, that's the dopamine spike, and that's that engagement. It's different to the euphoria you feel when you actually get the, beat the boss, or, Peggle being a perfect example. Very different, but it's that focused engagement which is really critical for creating experience. When we're trying to create engagement, we're really focused on the dopamine. So what Reed Montague said was, well, it's kind of acting like this warmer, colder game for children. You blindfold a child, and you give them cues based upon either getting closer to the toy or further away. And this idea that warmer, warmer, colder, warmer, warmer, hot, you got it. This idea of this heat map which the child creates because it's blindfolded of the room it's in to where the reward is. So what dopamine's doing, actually dopamine is chattering constantly in our brain. They've been monitoring it for a while, and it chatters constantly. There's spikes and drops, and some of it's tied to paying attention to the cues. So what he started suggesting was, is the fact that throughout our experience, throughout our lives, we've uncovered different things which are motivational to us. So we've all had experiences, and we start paying attention to the cues which preceded, allowing us to anticipate what is engaging to us. So each one of us has slightly different takes on it around what's motivation. So for me, reading, learning, but the smell of a book, smell of an old book even, is really engaging to me. So I'm paying attention to that cue, and potentially that is driving some of that dopamine and engagement as I pay attention to the things which are engaging to me. So we started talking about this concept of this idea that we can understand the core motivations. So I don't have time to talk about it today, but drawing from Ryan and Dietschy's work, but also drawing from evolutionary psychology. Lawrence and Noria did some great work on pulling together all of this research and looking at what are the core motivations. And they bucketed it up into sort of four main categories. Three of them we pay attention in motivational design. So mastery, exploration, curiosity is kind of the learning dimension. And that's to do with most of the stuff which we do trying to learn about our environment. Social competition, social cooperation, they're actually separated out in two separate categories. And more research has shown they're actually tied to slightly different neurochemicals as well. And this idea of social competition being different to social cooperation is, if you think about status and some of the things around hierarchy, all of those things are really to do with sort of a more social competition, they call it. Okay, so I need to keep moving. So social cooperation as well is more to do with empathy, and there's an idea of connection, what we call humanness. So what we decided, what we realized was, if we can take this and use technology to basically augment cues which basically allow you to know that you're going in a certain direction. So we call it a motivational GPS. Instead of a raw compass, we use digital technology, visceral engaging designs to create these cues which can help people move towards the things which are motivational to them. I'll stop there. Oh, I can go? Oh, 1 minute. 1 minute. So, I mean, just breaking it down for you, what we're trying to do is these turn-by-turn directions is, can we tap into these dopamine spikes by giving you cues? So things like Peggle, we look at a lot of things like game feel. To us, the status and badges and things like that aren't as important, because we want to pay attention to give the engaging cues either in retail environment or healthcare. We're trying to give feedback and make sure we're tapping into the motivations which these users. And this goes into things like how we do research around personas. We did one for Verizon retail stores. We ended up doing 100+ different personas and what we call persona grids, because we're looking at the motivations around these people using ethnographic research and trying to work out what drives them to create engaging experiences. And we do motivational maps of different kinds. This is a detailed one which we did. We call it a 3D customer journey, because we're trying to map the liking and wanting, the dopamine spikes against a standard customer journey, because we're trying to see how people are engaging in a restaurant experience in this one. So obviously there's a lot more than just motivation coming out of the neuroscience community, and we're trying to map it to a more overall framework where we can think about the deliberative system, Pavlovian system, the behavioral system, and really start understanding this difference between conscious and unconscious and designing engaging experiences around it.